A black man is humiliated after he is denied membership to a country club by a racist manager. The next day, the manager is shocked to find the black man back at the country club. But this time, something has changed with the black man. Thomas Reed pulled his car into the gravel driveway of Oakwood Country Club. The entrance was flanked by towering oak trees, their leaves casting shadows on the immaculately maintained lawn. Thomas parked and stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket before heading toward the main building. The grand colonial-style mansion stood ahead, its white columns reaching skyward, an emblem of Southern wealth and tradition. As Thomas approached the entrance, Claire Adams, the assistant manager, greeted him with a warm smile. She extended her hand. "Mr. Reed, welcome to Oakwood," Claire said. "I'm Claire Adams. I'll be showing you around today." "Thank you, Claire. Please call me Thomas," he replied, shaking her hand. His grip was firm, and his eyes showed a hint of curiosity as he glanced around. Claire led Thomas through the front doors into the club's grand foyer. The walls were adorned with oil paintings of past club presidents, all white men in tailored suits, their expressions serious and proud. The floors gleamed with polished wood, and the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. "We pride ourselves on our history here," Claire said, noticing Thomas's gaze. "Oakwood has been a staple in this community for over 70 years. We have the best golf courses in the state, a 5-star dining experience, and a network of the most influential people in Atlanta." Thomas nodded, taking it all in. "It's certainly impressive. I've heard a lot about the club's reputation. That's why I'm interested in joining." Claire smiled and motioned for him to follow. They walked through a set of French doors leading out to a sprawling patio overlooking the golf course. Several groups of well-dressed men and women sipped drinks under large umbrellas, laughing and chatting. "The membership here is quite exclusive," Claire continued. "We have a rigorous selection process to ensure that our members share the club's values and contribute to its legacy." Thomas glanced over at a group of men on the golf course, their laughter carrying across the manicured greens. "I'm interested in meeting like-minded individuals, people who are forward-thinking and driven. I believe in pushing boundaries and making connections that matter." Claire nodded. "That's exactly what Oakwood is about," she said, though her eyes flickered with a hint of uncertainty. She quickly shifted the conversation. "Would you like to see the golf course up close?" Thomas smiled. "I'd love to." They walked along a stone pathway that led to the edge of the course. The grass was a vibrant green, meticulously cut, and the sight of it made Thomas think about his sons. They both loved golf, and he could imagine them playing here, the sun on their faces, the laughter in the air. As they returned to the clubhouse, Claire led Thomas toward the lounge, a cozy space with leather chairs and a stone fireplace. A few members sat reading newspapers or sipping cocktails. "This is where our members come to relax," Claire explained. "It's a quiet space perfect for unwinding after a game or conducting a private meeting." Thomas looked around, appreciating the understated luxury. "It seems like a great place to network," he said. "I'm sure there are many opportunities to build relationships here." Claire nodded. "Absolutely. Many of our members have formed lifelong friendships and business partnerships through the club. It's a community." Just then, the door to the lounge opened, and James Foster, the general manager of Oakwood, entered. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with silver hair slicked back and a look of authority in his eyes. His suit was impeccably tailored, and he carried himself with an air of superiority. "Ah, Claire," James said, his eyes moving to Thomas. "You must be Mr. Reed." "Yes, that's right," Thomas replied, extending his hand. "Good to meet you, Mr. Foster." James shook Thomas's hand, his grip firm, but his expression unreadable. "Welcome to Oakwood. I understand you're interested in joining our club." Thomas nodded. "I am. Claire has been telling me all about the amenities in the community here. It sounds like the perfect place for someone with my interests." James's smile was thin. "Yes, well, we do have a very selective membership process. We have to ensure that our members maintain the standards and values that Oakwood is known for." Thomas caught the slight emphasis on standards and values. He maintained his composure, not wanting to jump to conclusions. "Of course, I'm sure I'd be a good fit." James glanced at Claire, then back at Thomas. "If you'll excuse us, Claire, I'd like to have a word with Mr. Reed in private." Claire looked between the two men, then nodded. "Of course, I'll be in my office if you need anything." James gestured for Thomas to follow him to a small office off the lounge. Once inside, James closed the door and sat behind his desk, motioning for Thomas to take a seat. "Mr. Reed, I've reviewed your application," James began, his tone formal. "You certainly have an impressive background. Successful business, prominent public presence. However, Oakwood is a very traditional club, and we have a certain image to uphold." Thomas remained calm, sensing where this was headed. "I understand. I'm willing to meet any requirements the club has for its members. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. It's not just about meeting requirements. It's about fitting in with the culture we've established here over the decades. Our members expect a certain level of continuity. Thomas felt a wave of anger, but kept his voice steady. Continuity? Are you saying I wouldn't fit in because of my background? James hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said, Oakwood has always been a place where like-minded individuals come together. Our members value the tradition and exclusivity that this club represents. Thomas met James's gaze, his expression hardening. I see. So it's not about qualifications or contributions. It's about keeping things the way they've always been. James didn't respond directly. I'm afraid your application doesn't meet our criteria at this time, Mr. Reed. I hope you understand. Thomas stood up slowly, his hands resting on the edge of James's desk. I understand perfectly, he said quietly. Thank you for your time. James offered a curt nod. Good day. Thomas left the office, his jaw clenched. Claire was waiting outside, her eyes questioning. He gave her a brief smile, masking his frustration. Thank you for the tour, Claire. I appreciate your time, Thomas said, shaking her hand again. Of course, Thomas. If you have any questions or need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out, Claire said, though Thomas sensed she already knew the outcome. As Thomas walked back to his car, he felt a surge of anger mixed with determination. The club's rejection wasn't just a personal affront. It was a challenge, one he intended to meet head-on. Driving away from Oakwood, Thomas's mind was already racing with possibilities. He wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. If the club valued tradition over progress, then maybe it was time for a new kind of tradition, something that would shake Oakwood to its core. Thomas Reed's office was a modern space in the heart of Atlanta, all glass walls and sleek furniture, with a view that stretched out to the city skyline. He sat at his desk, fingers tapping lightly on his phone as he waited for the call to connect. It rang twice before Zara Carter answered. Thomas, it's good to hear from you, Zara said, her voice smooth and controlled. She had the tone of someone used to dealing with high-stakes business. How can I help you today? Zara, I'd like to discuss a proposal, Thomas said, leaning back in his chair. He kept his voice steady, masking the anger that had simmered since his encounter with James Foster. It's about Oakwood Country Club. Are you free to meet today? There was a brief pause on the line. Then Zara replied, I have some time this afternoon. Why don't you come by the club around 2? We can discuss it in my office. 2 o'clock works for me, Thomas agreed. I'll see you then. Thomas hung up and looked out the window, his thoughts already on the upcoming meeting. He had known Zara Carter for years through business circles, but they'd never interacted beyond polite conversation at networking events. This meeting would be different. It wasn't about pleasantries. It was about making a point. Thomas arrived at Oakwood Country Club that afternoon, his expression unreadable as he walked through the familiar entrance. Claire was at the reception desk and gave him a nod as he passed, her eyes flickering with curiosity. Thomas, good to see you again, she said. Zara's expecting you. Her office is down the hall. Thanks, Claire, Thomas replied with a brief smile, then headed down the corridor. Zara's office was spacious, with large windows overlooking the golf course. The room was decorated with tasteful art and expensive furniture, reflecting her taste for luxury. Zara stood as Thomas entered, extending her hand with a welcoming smile. Thomas, please have a seat, she said, gesturing to a chair in front of her desk. I was intrigued when you called. What's this proposal you mentioned? Thomas sat down, meeting her gaze directly. I'll get straight to the point, Zara. I want to buy Oakwood. Zara raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback, but she quickly composed herself. That's quite a proposition. May I ask why? Thomas leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. I had a rather unpleasant experience with your general manager, James Foster. He made it clear that my membership application was denied, not because of any lack of qualifications, but because of my background. I've faced this kind of discrimination before, but I didn't expect it from a place like Oakwood. Zara's smile tightened. James can be traditional, but buying the club just to make a point seems like a drastic measure. It's not just about making a point, Thomas replied calmly. It's about changing the culture of this place. Oakwood has a reputation for exclusivity, but that doesn't have to mean exclusion. I see an opportunity to modernize, to make this club a symbol of excellence and inclusivity. With the right leadership, Oakwood could attract a broader, more diverse membership, increasing its influence and profitability. Zara studied Thomas for a moment, her fingers lightly drumming on the arm of her chair. You're talking about a complete shift in the club's identity. That's not something our current members would easily accept. Thomas nodded. Change is never easy, but it's necessary. And let's be honest, Zara, Oakwood's membership has been declining. Younger generations aren't interested in joining a club that feels outdated and exclusionary. If you want Oakwood to thrive, you need to adapt. Zara's expression softened slightly, her business instincts kicking in. You've done your research. Oakwood's revenue has been stable, but it could certainly improve. How do you plan to handle the backlash from current members who might resist these changes? By showing them the benefits, Thomas said. We don't need to alienate anyone. We can introduce new events, partnerships, and initiatives that appeal to a wider audience. Gradually, the culture will shift. Those who want to be part of something progressive will stay. Those who don't, well, they'll have a choice to make. Zara sat back, considering his words. And what would you offer for the club? Thomas pulled out a folder from his briefcase and handed it to her. Here's my offer, along with a detailed plan for the first year of changes. I'm willing to invest in renovations, marketing, and staffing to make this transition as smooth as possible. Zara opened the folder, her eyes scanning the contents. She remained silent for a few moments, then looked up at Thomas. This is a substantial offer. You're serious about this? I am, Thomas said firmly. This isn't just a business deal for me. It's about setting a standard. I want Oakwood to be a place where my sons can come, not just because of our financial status, but because they're genuinely welcomed. Zara closed the folder and placed it on her desk. She looked at Thomas with a thoughtful expression. I'll need time to consider this. It's a big decision. Take all the time you need, Thomas replied. But understand this, change is coming. Whether Oakwood is ready for it or not, I'd prefer to work with you to make it happen. Zara nodded, extending her hand. I'll be in touch soon, Thomas. Thank you for bringing this to me. Thomas shook her hand, standing up. I appreciate your time, Zara. I look forward to your response. As he left her office, Thomas felt a sense of satisfaction. He knew he'd planted a seed. Whether it would grow depended on Zara's willingness to embrace the future. For Thomas, the meeting wasn't just about acquiring a business. It was about paving the way for a new era. As he walked back through the club, Thomas glanced at the members enjoying the sunny afternoon. Some nodded in acknowledgement. Others barely noticed him. It didn't matter. Soon they would have to notice. And Thomas was ready to make sure of it. Thomas Reed stood in his office, gazing out at the Atlanta skyline as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the city. His phone buzzed on his desk, and he turned to see Zara Carter's name flashing on the screen. He picked it up, his heart steady, his mind prepared. Thomas Reed, he answered, his voice calm. Thomas, it's Zara. I've thought about your proposal, and I'm ready to move forward, Zara said, her voice firm, but with a note of concession. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. That's good to hear, Zara. I believe this will be a positive move for both of us. When can we finalize the details? I've already had my legal team draft the necessary documents, Zara replied. If you're available, I'd like to meet today and close the deal. I can be at the club in an hour, Thomas said. I'll bring my team as well. Perfect, Zara said. I'll see you then. Thomas hung up, his mind already shifting gears. This was more than just a business acquisition. It was the first step in changing the culture of Oakwood Country Club. He gathered the necessary paperwork, or called his legal team, and headed to the club. An hour later, Thomas walked into Oakwood's main building, flanked by his lawyer, Andrew, a sharp-dressed man in his late 30s, and his financial advisor, Lisa, a composed woman with a no-nonsense attitude. They made their way to Zara's office, where she was waiting with her own team. Thomas, Andrew, Lisa, welcome, Zara said, standing to greet them. Let's get started, shall we? They all took seats around the large, polished table in Zara's office. The room was filled with the quiet hum of business, a few shuffling papers, the faint click of pens, and the rustling of suit jackets. Zara's lawyer began by reviewing the terms of the sale, but Thomas's mind was already on the future. After an hour of negotiations, clarifications, and signatures, Zara set down her pen and looked at Thomas. That's it then. Oakwood is yours. Thomas nodded, a sense of accomplishment settling over him. Thank you, Zara. I believe this is the beginning of something great. Zara leaned back in her chair. I've been thinking about what you said, Thomas, about modernizing the club. I know you'll face resistance, especially from some of the older members. How do you plan to handle that? Thomas smiled slightly. With respect and transparency, I don't intend to force change overnight. I'll start by implementing gradual changes, new events, updated policies, community outreach. We'll build momentum. Those who see the benefits will support the new direction. For those who don't, well, they'll have to decide if Oakwood is still the right place for them. Zara nodded. I've seen clubs adapt and thrive under the right leadership. You seem to have a clear vision, and that's what Oakwood needs. Just be prepared for the pushback. I expect it, Thomas said, his tone steady. But I've dealt with challenges before. This one won't be any different. Andrew interjected. We'll make sure the transition is as smooth as possible. Our team is ready to support Thomas with any legal and financial adjustments. Lisa added, we've already started drafting plans for the first set of changes. Thomas has a clear roadmap. We're confident in its success. Zara stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Well, Thomas, I wish you the best of luck. I'll be watching to see how Oakwood evolves. You have my support, at least from the sidelines. Thomas extended his hand. Thank you, Zara. I appreciate your trust. Oakwood is in good hands. They shook hands, sealing the deal. Thomas gathered his team, and they left Zara's office, making their way down the hallway. The atmosphere in the club felt different now, as if the air itself had shifted with the ownership. Thomas Reed stood at the head of the long mahogany table in Oakwood Country Club's main hall. The sunlight poured through the large windows, casting a golden glow on the polished wood floors and the faces of the staff gathered before him. Thomas could feel the weight of the room's history pressing down, the traditions and expectations that had defined this space for decades. But today was about setting a new course. Thank you all for coming, Thomas began, his voice calm and steady. As many of you know, Oakwood is now under new ownership. I want to take this opportunity to share my vision for the future of this club. He paused, glancing around the room. Claire Adams sat near the front, her expression supportive but cautious. James Foster was in the back, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on Thomas with a mix of skepticism and defiance. The rest of the staff ranged from curious to concerned, their expressions mirroring the uncertainty that Thomas knew was natural at a time like this. Oakwood has a long and proud history, Thomas continued. It's a place known for its exclusivity, its elegance, and its prestige. I respect that history, and I want to build on it, but I believe we can do more. We can be more. Thomas let his words hang in the air for a moment, feeling the tension in the room. He knew he had to address the underlying concerns directly. I understand that change can be uncomfortable. It can even be frightening, but it's also necessary. We cannot continue to thrive if we're unwilling to adapt to the world around us. The truth is, Oakwood's membership has been declining, and we need to take steps to ensure this club remains a vibrant, welcoming place. James Foster leaned forward in his chair, his voice cutting through the silence. And what kind of changes are you proposing, Mr. Reed? What exactly do you mean by more? Thomas met James's gaze, unflinching. I mean opening our doors wider, James. We will introduce policies that welcome a more diverse membership, people from all walks of life who share a love for what Oakwood stands for. We'll be hosting new events that appeal to a broader audience, focusing on community engagement and modern values. This club will become a leader in inclusivity and excellence. A murmur rippled through the room. Some staff members nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Thomas could feel the divide forming, but he pressed on. I've already spoken with Claire about organizing a series of community events, Thomas said, gesturing toward her. These events will not only showcase the beauty of Oakwood, but also our commitment to becoming a more inclusive space. We'll be partnering with local businesses and organizations to bring new opportunities and fresh perspectives to the club. Claire nodded, adding her voice to the conversation. We've already started planning. Our first event will be a charity golf tournament open to the public. It's a chance to show what Oakwood can offer and to engage with the community in a meaningful way. James's eyes narrowed. And what if the current members don't approve of these changes? This club has always been about maintaining a certain standard. People come here because they want exclusivity, not open doors. Thomas kept his tone measured. Exclusivity doesn't have to mean exclusion, James. We can maintain high standards while being open to new ideas and people. Change doesn't mean lowering our values. It means elevating them. Those who truly appreciate what Oakwood stands for will see the value in what we're doing. James shook his head slightly, leaning back in his chair. We'll see about that, he muttered under his breath, but Thomas caught it. We will see, Thomas agreed, raising his voice slightly to address the entire room again. I'm not asking anyone to compromise on quality or tradition. I'm asking for a chance to build something even better. I believe in Oakwood's potential, and I believe in all of you. Together, we can make this club a symbol of what's possible when we embrace progress and respect. The room fell silent, the weight of Thomas's words settling over everyone. He could see the doubt in some faces, the uncertainty in others, but he also saw curiosity and even a hint of excitement. Claire stood up, breaking the silence. I support this vision, she said clearly. I've been at Oakwood for years and I've seen the need for change. Thomas's ideas could bring new life to this club. I'm ready to be a part of that. Several heads nodded in agreement, and a few staff members murmured their support. Thomas felt a swell of gratitude toward Claire. Her backing was crucial, and her willingness to speak up meant a lot. "Thank you, Claire," Thomas said, "and thank you to those of you who are willing to give this a chance. I know it's a lot to take in, but I promise you this. I'm committed to making Oakwood a place we can all be proud of, a place where everyone feels welcome, respected, and valued." He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "I'm open to your ideas, your feedback, and your concerns. My door is always open. This is not just about me. It's about all of us working together to create something remarkable." With that, Thomas concluded the meeting. He watched as the staff began to disperse, conversations breaking out in small groups. Some looked thoughtful, others apprehensive. James Foster stayed behind, his expression unreadable, his gaze following Thomas as he moved toward the exit. Thomas stepped into the hallway, feeling a mix of relief and determination. He had said what needed to be said, and now it was time to act. Claire caught up with him as he walked. "You handled that well," she said, matching his stride. "James is a tough one. He's been here for so long. He doesn't like change." "I expected resistance," Thomas replied. "I don't plan on forcing anyone to accept these changes, but I also won't let a few holdouts dictate the direction of this club." Claire nodded. "You've got my support, Thomas. I think this is exactly what Oakwood needs." Thomas stopped and turned to her. "I appreciate that, Claire. Your support means a lot. We've got a lot of work ahead, but I'm confident we can do it. Just let me know how I can help," Claire said with a smile. Thomas smiled back. "Count on it." As Thomas continued down the hall, his thoughts were already on the next steps. The meeting had gone as well as he could have hoped, but he knew that actions would speak louder than words. It was time to start implementing his plans, to show the doubters that change could be a force for good. He walked through the main doors and out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on his face. Oakwood was his now, and he was ready to transform it. The club's future was bright, and Thomas was determined to make sure it shone with the light of progress, respect, and inclusivity. Thomas Reed sat in his new office at a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a clear view of the golf course. The sun was shining, and the course was bustling with activity. Members playing rounds, staff maintaining the grounds, and a few families enjoying the weather. It was the perfect backdrop for his vision of a more inclusive, vibrant Oakwood. Today, he was meeting with Claire Adams to discuss the next steps in making that vision a reality. There was a soft knock on the door, and Claire stepped inside. "Thomas, you wanted to see me?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Yes, Claire, come in. Have a seat," Thomas said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for speaking up during the meeting yesterday. Your support meant a lot." Claire smiled and sat down. "I believe in what you're trying to do, Thomas. Oakwood needs to change if it's going to survive. The way things have been going, or it's just not sustainable." Thomas nodded. "Exactly. I've been thinking about how we can start implementing these changes. We need to do it in a way that shows the benefits without alienating our current members. I want to make sure everyone feels included, even those who might be resistant at first." Claire leaned forward, her expression serious. "I think the charity golf tournament is a good starting point. It's something familiar, but we can open it to the public and involve local businesses. It will show that we're reaching out to the community while still keeping the club's traditions intact." Thomas considered her suggestion. "I like that. A charity event is something that's hard to argue against. We can market it as Oakwood giving back, strengthening our ties with the community. Who do you think we should partner with?" Claire thought for a moment. "There's a local children's hospital that's always looking for support. They do a lot of outreach in underserved areas, so it would tie in nicely with the message of inclusivity you want to promote." Thomas nodded, making a note. "That's a great idea. We'll start by reaching out to them. And let's involve some of our newer members in the planning process. It'll give them a chance to feel more engaged and show that we value their input." "Agreed," Claire said. "We should also consider updating some of our policies to reflect this new direction, maybe starting with a review of the membership guidelines. It's outdated, and I think it's been a barrier for a lot of potential members." Thomas smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've already started drafting some revisions. I want to make the membership process more transparent and based on character and community involvement, rather than just wealth and connections." Claire raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You've been busy." Thomas shrugged. "I believe in leading by example. If I want others to embrace this change, I have to show that I'm committed. And I know this won't be easy. People like James will push back, but we need to stay focused on the bigger picture." Claire nodded. "James has been here a long time, and he has his supporters among the older members. But I've talked to some of the staff, and there's more support for change than you might think. People are tired of the same old routine. They want something fresh. That's good to hear, Thomas said, leaning back in his chair. We're going to need that support. I want to start having regular meetings with the staff, get their feedback, and keep them involved. If they feel like they're part of this process, they'll be more likely to support it. I can set that up, Claire offered. We could do a monthly town hall style meeting, give everyone a chance to voice their opinions and ideas. It'll help with transparency and make people feel valued. Thomas smiled. I like the way you think, Claire. Let's make it happen. Also, I want you to take on a more prominent role in this transition. Your insights and experience are invaluable. I'd like you to work closely with me on all major initiatives. Claire looked surprised but pleased. I'd be honored, Thomas. I've always wanted to do more here, but I felt like my hands were tied by the old ways of thinking. This is a chance to make a real difference. Thomas extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Claire. Together, we're going to make Oakwood better than it's ever been. Claire shook his hand, her grip firm. Count me in. I'm ready to get started. After Claire left, Thomas took a moment to reflect on the conversation. He felt a sense of optimism. Claire's support was crucial, and her practical approach to implementing change was exactly what he needed. They had a plan, and now it was time to put it into action. Thomas picked up the phone and called Lisa, his financial advisor. Lisa, it's Thomas. We're moving forward with the charity golf tournament idea. I'll need you to run some numbers and help coordinate the partnership with the local children's hospital. Got it, Lisa replied. I'll start making calls and get everything in motion. Do you have a date in mind? Let's aim for next month, Thomas said. I want to make sure we have enough time to market it properly and get the community involved. This is our first big step, and it needs to make an impact. I'll get right on it, Lisa said. Anything else? Yes, actually, Thomas said. We're also revising the membership guidelines. I'll send you the draft I've been working on. I want your input before we finalize anything. We need to make sure it aligns with our new direction. I'll take a look, Lisa said. Sounds like things are moving forward. They are, Thomas said, feeling a surge of determination. And this is just the beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Thomas and Claire met with various department heads, discussing the upcoming charity event, the new membership policies, and the overall direction for Oakwood. There were meetings with marketing teams to develop promotional materials, discussions with local businesses to secure sponsorships, and endless phone calls to coordinate logistics. Claire's idea of regular staff meetings was implemented immediately, with the first one scheduled for the following week. Thomas wanted to hear directly from the employees, the people who knew the club best and interacted with its members daily. He needed their insights and their support. Thomas spent hours reviewing the club's current operations, identifying areas that needed improvement, and brainstorming ways to modernize. He worked late into the night, often with Claire by his side, both of them fueled by coffee and the desire to make a difference. One afternoon, as they wrapped up another long meeting, Thomas leaned back in his chair and looked at Claire. You know, when I first came to Oakwood, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing. I wanted to make this place better, not just for me or my family, but for everyone. I didn't realize how much work it would take, but I'm glad we're doing it. Claire smiled. I know what you mean. I've been here for years, and I've always felt like something was missing. Now, with you leading the way, it feels like we're finally heading in the right direction. Thomas nodded. It's going to be a long road, but with people like you on my side, I know we'll get there. Claire stood up, stretching her arms. Well, let's make sure we stay on track. We've got a lot to do before the charity event, and I think James is starting to rally some of the members against us. Thomas's expression hardened. Let him try. We're doing what's right. And in the end, that's what matters. As long as we stay focused and keep moving forward, we'll succeed. Claire nodded, her face determined. You're right. We've got this. I'll start reaching out to the staff about the town hall meeting. We need to keep the momentum going. Thank you, Claire, Thomas said. I couldn't do this without you. She smiled. We're in this together, Thomas. Let's show everyone what Oakwood can be. As Claire left the office, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were making progress. The changes were starting to take shape. And while there would be challenges ahead, he was ready to face them. With allies like Claire and the support of his team, Thomas knew they could overcome any obstacle. He turned back to his desk, his mind already on the next steps. Oakwood was evolving, and Thomas was determined to lead it into a future that was brighter, more inclusive, and filled with promise. The morning air at Oakwood Country Club was filled with the sound of lawnmowers humming and sprinklers hissing. Thomas Reed stood on the veranda, sipping his coffee as he watched the staff prepare the grounds for the day. It had been a month since he took ownership, and the changes were beginning to show. Today was a big day. The club was hosting its first public charity golf tournament, benefiting the local children's hospital. Thomas could see volunteers setting up tables near the entrance, arranging promotional materials, and greeting early arrivals. Banners with the Oakwood logo fluttered in the breeze, announcing the event. The excitement was palpable, and Thomas felt a surge of pride. This was the first tangible step toward opening Oakwood's doors and engaging with the broader community. Claire Adams joined Thomas on the veranda, carrying a clipboard and looking out over the grounds. "Everything's coming together nicely," she said, a satisfied smile on her face. "We've got over 100 participants signed up, and the local news is sending a crew to cover the event." "That's great news," Thomas replied. "It's exactly what we need. Positive exposure and a good cause to show the community what Oakwood is really about." Claire nodded. "I've been talking with some of the staff, and they're excited. This is the most activity we've seen here in a long time. It feels like a different place." Thomas smiled. "That's the idea. We want people to see Oakwood as a part of the community, not just a private club hidden behind gates. This is only the beginning." As the morning unfolded, participants began arriving, ranging from longtime members to new faces from the community. Families with children, local business owners, and charity representatives mingled on the greens, chatting and enjoying the atmosphere. The event felt welcoming and inclusive, a clear departure from the club's previous reputation. Thomas moved through the crowd, shaking hands and engaging in conversation. He greeted old members and introduced himself to new ones, making a point to listen to their thoughts and feedback. Most people were supportive, excited about the direction Oakwood was taking. A few were skeptical, unsure if the changes would last, but Thomas reassured them with his genuine enthusiasm. As he approached one of the registration tables, Thomas noticed James Foster standing nearby, watching the event unfold. James's expression was hard to read, a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled disapproval. Thomas took a deep breath and walked over to him. "Good morning, James," Thomas said, keeping his tone friendly. "Glad to see you out here today." James nodded curtly. "Morning, Thomas. Quite the event you've got going on here." "Not exactly what I'd call a typical day at Oakwood," Thomas smiled. "That's the point, isn't it? We're trying to do something different. Bring the community together for a good cause. I think it's going well." James glanced around, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You've certainly got a lot of new faces here. I just hope this doesn't drive away our core members. Oakwood's always been about exclusivity. That's why people come here." Thomas met James's gaze directly. "Exclusivity doesn't have to mean isolation, James. We can still provide a high-quality experience while being open and inclusive. That's how we grow, by adapting and welcoming new perspectives." James crossed his arms. "I've been here a long time, Thomas. I've seen trends come and go. People like the idea of change until it affects them. You might want to be careful not to alienate the members who've supported this club for years." "I appreciate your concern," Thomas said evenly, "but I'm not just looking to maintain Oakwood. I want to make it thrive, and that means embracing change. If some people are uncomfortable with it, then maybe it's time they consider why they're here." James's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He turned and walked away, leaving Thomas to watch his retreating figure. Thomas felt a twinge of frustration, but quickly brushed it aside. He couldn't let people like James distract him from his goals. There would always be resistance. Later in the day, Thomas found Claire near the main tent, coordinating with the volunteers. She looked up as he approached, her face brightening. "How's it going out there?" she asked. "Better than I expected," Thomas said. "The turnout is great, and everyone seems to be having a good time. I had a chat with James, though. He's still pushing back, trying to stir doubt." Claire sighed. "He's been speaking to some of the older members, voicing concerns about the direction we're heading. I've overheard a few conversations. He's planting seeds of doubt." Thomas nodded. "I figured as much, but we can't let that slow us down. We need to keep showing that these changes are positive. Success is the best way to silence critics." "Agreed," Claire said. And today is a success. The local news crew just arrived, and they want to do a short interview with you. It'll be a good opportunity to get our message out there." "Perfect," Thomas said. "I'll head over now. Keep me updated if anything comes up." Thomas made his way to the media area where a cameraman and reporter were setting up. The reporter, a young woman with a friendly smile, extended her hand as he approached. "Mr. Reed, I'm Emily from Channel 7 News. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us." "Of course, Emily," Thomas said, shaking her hand. "I'm happy to share what we're doing here." The interview was brief but effective. Thomas spoke about Oakwood's commitment to the community, the importance of inclusivity, and how events like the charity golf tournament were just the beginning of his vision for the club. He emphasized the values of respect and excellence, making it clear that Oakwood was evolving for the better. After the interview, Thomas returned to the main event area. The tournament was in full swing, with groups of golfers on the course, laughter and conversation filling the air. Volunteers handed out refreshments, and children played in a designated area near the clubhouse. As the day wound down, Thomas gathered the staff and volunteers in the clubhouse for a quick debrief. First, I want to thank all of you for your hard work and dedication. Today's event was a success because of your efforts. We've raised a significant amount for the Children's Hospital, and we've shown the community what Oakwood is all about. The room erupted in applause, and Thomas smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He continued, "This is just the beginning. We have more events planned, more ways to engage with the community, and more opportunities to make Oakwood a place we can all be proud of. Let's keep this momentum going." After the debrief, Thomas stood by the entrance, shaking hands with the departing guests and thanking them for their participation. He could see the impact of the day's event on their faces. Smiles, excitement, and a sense of connection. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Claire approached as the last guest left, her expression tired but happy. "We did it, Thomas. Today was a big win." "We did," Thomas agreed, "but there's still a lot of work to do. This is just the first step. We need to build on this success, keep pushing forward." Claire nodded. "I'm ready. Whatever it takes, I'm with you." Thomas looked out at the golf course, now empty and quiet as the sun began to set. "We're going to make Oakwood a place where everyone feels welcome," he said softly. "A place that stands for something more than just privilege. We're going to build a legacy of respect and excellence." Claire smiled. "I believe we will." Thomas turned to her. "Let's get started on the next event. There's no time to waste. We've got momentum now, and I want to keep it going." As they walked back toward the clubhouse, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. The day had been a success, but it was only a glimpse of what was possible. With Claire by his side and the support of the staff, he knew they could overcome any challenge. Oakwood was changing, and Thomas was ready to lead the way. The future was bright, and the possibilities were endless. The evening sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Country Club's lush grounds, creating a warm glow over the clubhouse. Thomas Reed stood on the terrace, looking out at the now empty golf course. The first charity event under his leadership had ended hours ago, but its energy still lingered in the air. The success of the day filled Thomas with a deep sense of accomplishment. Claire Adams joined him, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed one to Thomas and leaned against the railing, gazing out at the serene landscape. "You look pleased," she said, her tone light. Thomas took a sip of his tea and nodded. "I am. Today went better than I expected. The turnout, the response, the way everyone came together, it felt like a real community event. This is exactly what I envisioned for Oakwood." Claire smiled. "It was a great day. The charity raised more money than we projected, and I overheard several members talking about how much they enjoyed seeing new faces here. Even some of the more skeptical ones seemed to be warming up to the changes." Thomas nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "That's what we need. Slow, steady progress. I know there will always be resistance, but if we keep showing people the benefits of these changes, I believe they'll come around." Claire turned to Thomas, her expression thoughtful. "You've already made a huge difference in such a short time. People are noticing. Even James couldn't argue with the success of today's event, though I'm sure he'll try to find something to criticize." Thomas chuckled. "James is James. He represents the old guard, and they're not going to give up without a fight. But I'm not worried about him. I'm more focused on building on today's momentum." Claire's smile faded slightly. "Speaking of James, I heard he's been having private meetings with some of the older members. He's been voicing concerns about the direction you're taking the club, saying that it's moving too fast and that it's not what Oakwood is supposed to be." Thomas's expression hardened, but he kept his tone calm. "I expected that. People like James are afraid of losing their control, their influence. They see these changes as a threat to their comfort, but I'm not going to let fear dictate how we run this club." Claire nodded. "I just wanted you to be aware. The last thing we need is a power struggle undermining everything we've worked for." Thomas turned to her, his eyes serious. "I appreciate you telling me. I'll keep an eye on things, but my focus is on the future, not on playing politics. As long as we keep making progress, we'll win people over." Claire relaxed, her smile returning. "You're right. Today proved that Oakwood can be more than it's been. We just need to keep pushing forward." Thomas took another sip of his tea, his gaze returning to the horizon. "I've been thinking about the next steps," he said. "We should capitalize on today's success with more events. Maybe a community outreach program. something that gets Oakwood involved in local schools or supports small businesses. Claire's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. It would show that Oakwood isn't just opening its doors to new members, but actively investing in the community. I can start putting together some proposals and reaching out to local organizations. Perfect, Thomas said. Let's also work on the membership guidelines. I want to finalize those changes soon, so we're ready to present them to the board. We need to set a clear direction and show that we're serious about inclusivity. Claire nodded. I'll draft the revisions and make sure they reflect our new values. This is going to send a strong message to everyone, both current and prospective members. Thomas felt a wave of gratitude for Claire's support. I couldn't do this without you, Claire. Your dedication and insight have been invaluable. Claire smiled, touched by his words. I believe in what you're doing, Thomas. It's not just about changing a club. It's about setting a standard for how things should be. Oakwood is becoming a place that stands for something, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thomas looked out over the grounds, the beauty of the evening settling into his mind. You know, when I first walked into Oakwood and was told I didn't belong, I could have just walked away. But something inside me knew that this place could be so much more. It's not just about who's allowed in, it's about the kind of legacy we're building. Claire nodded, her voice soft. You're creating a place where everyone feels like they belong. That's something worth fighting for. Thomas's gaze lingered on the golf course, imagining it filled with people from all walks of life, enjoying the game, the camaraderie, the sense of community. We're on the right path. There will be challenges, but we're ready for them. As long as we stay true to our vision, Oakwood will thrive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas and Claire headed back inside. The clubhouse was quiet now, the echoes of the day's activity fading into the evening stillness. They walked through the main hall, where earlier that day, laughter and conversation had filled the air. Thomas paused near the entrance, looking at the photos of past club presidents lining the walls. Each one was a reminder of Oakwood's history, a history steeped in tradition and exclusivity. But Thomas knew that history didn't have to dictate the future. We should update these, he said, gesturing to the photos. Include images that reflect the new Oakwood. Events like today, our community involvement. Let's show that this club is about more than just the past. Claire nodded. I'll work with the communications team on that. It's a good way to visually represent the changes we're making. Thomas turned to her, a smile spreading across his face. We're building something special here, Claire. Today was proof of that, and I'm just getting started. Claire smiled back, her eyes shining with shared enthusiasm. I'm with you, Thomas, every step of the way. As Thomas walked to his car, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. The day had been a success, not just in terms of money raised or positive feedback, but in proving that his vision for Oakwood was achievable. Change was possible. Progress was within reach. He drove home, his mind buzzing with ideas for future events, new initiatives, and ways to continue building the community he envisioned. Thomas knew that the road ahead would have its obstacles, but he was ready for them. He had allies, a plan, and a clear vision. Oakwood was no longer just a country club. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people worked together for a common cause. It was a place where everyone was welcome, where respect and excellence were more than just words. They were the foundation of a legacy being built day by day. As Thomas pulled into his driveway, he took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace. He knew there was still much to do, but for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at home. The future was bright, and he was ready to embrace it. The sky over Oakwood Country Club was clear and bright, a perfect backdrop for the community event Thomas Reed had been planning for weeks. The main lawn was buzzing with activity. Food trucks lined the driveway, serving everything from gourmet tacos to freshly brewed coffee, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Families explored the booths showcasing local crafts, children played games on the open grass, and groups of people gathered around tables, chatting and enjoying the day. Thomas stood at the entrance of the clubhouse, observing the scene with a deep sense of pride. The community open house event was designed to welcome everyone, showcasing Oakwood's new, inclusive direction. Today wasn't just about showing off the club's facilities. It was about demonstrating that Oakwood was a place for all, not just a privileged few. Claire Adams joined him, clipboard in hand, looking pleased. We've had over 400 people come through so far, she said, checking her notes. And it's not even noon yet. That's exactly what we wanted, Thomas replied, smiling. People are starting to see that Oakwood isn't just a private enclave, it's part of the community. Claire nodded. I've been talking to some of the guests, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. They appreciate that we're opening up the club for events like this. It's changing how people see us. Good, Thomas said, scanning the crowd. What about the members? Any concerns? A few, but nothing serious, Claire said. Most of them are here enjoying the event. Even James is around. I saw him talking to some of the older members. Thomas raised an eyebrow. James? I wouldn't have expected him to come. Claire shrugged. Maybe he's just curious to see how this all plays out. Or maybe he's looking for something to criticize. Thomas chuckled. Knowing James, it's probably both. But I'm not worried. Today is about moving forward. As the day went on, Thomas mingled with guests, shaking hands and listening to feedback. The atmosphere was lively and the response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. People appreciated the openness of the event, the chance to experience Oakwood without barriers. Near the middle of the afternoon, Thomas noticed James Foster standing near a group of older members, gesturing animatedly. James's face was red and his voice was raised, even though the crowd around him seemed uncomfortable. Thomas decided to approach, sensing that something was brewing. James, Thomas said as he walked up, is everything all right? James turned to Thomas, his eyes blazing with anger. No, everything is not all right, he snapped. I've been talking to members, people who have been coming here for decades, and they're concerned. This circus is not what Oakwood is supposed to be. We're a private club, not a public park. The group of members around them shifted awkwardly, some looking down, others glancing at Thomas to see how he would respond. Thomas kept his tone calm. James, today's event is about building community and showing that Oakwood is a welcoming place. It doesn't diminish the club's quality or its history, it enhances it. James scoffed. Enhances it? By turning this place into a playground for anyone who wants to wander in? You're destroying everything that Oakwood stands for, everything that made it special. Thomas felt a wave of frustration but remained composed. Oakwood's values are still intact, James. We're just expanding what those values mean. We're showing that excellence isn't about excluding others. It's about embracing diversity and building a stronger community. James shook his head, his voice rising. You don't get it, Thomas. People came here because they wanted exclusivity, a place away from the noise and chaos. You're taking that away. You're making this place common, and people are going to leave because of it. Several members in the group nodded slightly, their faces reflecting James's sentiments. Thomas knew he needed to address this directly, not just for James, but for everyone watching. James, Thomas said, his voice firm, I understand that change can be difficult, and I respect your feelings. But the world is changing, and Oakwood needs to change with it. This event is about showing that we can be exclusive in our standards without excluding people. If that's something you can't support, then maybe it's time to reconsider your place here. James's face turned redder, his eyes narrowing. So that's it? You're threatening to get rid of me because I disagree with you? Thomas met his gaze steadily. I'm not threatening you, James. I'm giving you a choice. You can either be part of this new direction, supporting the community and the inclusivity we're building, or you can step aside. But I won't allow you to undermine everything we're working for. If you can't align with the Oakwood's new values, then yes, it might be time for you to leave. The tension in the air was palpable. The members around them watched in silence, holding their breath. James's fists clenched at his sides, and for a moment, it looked like he might lash out. But then he took a deep breath, his face twisted in a sneer. You'll regret this, Thomas, James said, his voice low but filled with venom. You think you can just come in here and change everything overnight? Oakwood will never be what you want it to be. You'll drive away the real members, and this place will fall apart. Thomas remained calm. I don't believe that, James. I believe Oakwood can be a place or everyone, a place that upholds high standards and values while being inclusive and welcoming. And that's what we're going to continue working toward. James shook his head, turning away. You're making a mistake, he muttered as he stormed off. Thomas watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and resolve. He knew that this confrontation had been inevitable, that James represented a mindset that was incompatible with the future he envisioned for Oakwood. But he also knew that standing his ground was necessary to move forward. Later that evening, Thomas stood in the clubhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The event was winding down, guests and members slowly making their way home. Claire joined him, her expression concerned. I heard what happened with James, she said softly. Are you okay? Thomas nodded. I'm fine. It was bound to happen sooner or later. James made his choice. He's not willing to support the direction we're taking, and I can't allow him to undermine everything we've built. Claire looked out at the grounds, where a few families lingered, children laughing as they played. It's a shame. He's been part of Oakwood for so long. But I understand why you had to do it. We can't move forward if we're always looking back. Thomas turned to her, his face set with determination. Exactly. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. We're building something new here, something better. And I won't let anyone stand in the way of that, Claire smiled. You've done an incredible job, Thomas. Today was a success despite everything. Oakwood is becoming what you envisioned, a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. Thomas nodded, his gaze returning to the horizon. We still have a long way to go, but we're on the right path. Today was proof of that. As long as we keep pushing forward, Oakwood will thrive. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. And you know I'm with you every step of the way. Thomas looked at her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I couldn't do this without you, Claire. Together, we're going to make Oakwood a place that stands for something real, a legacy of respect, excellence, and inclusivity. As the last of the guests left and the grounds grew quiet, Thomas walked to his car, reflecting on the day's events. The confrontation with James had been difficult, but it had also reaffirmed his commitment to his vision. Oakwood was changing, and not everyone would be able to adapt. But Thomas was determined to create a place where everyone could find a sense of belonging, where old traditions could blend with new values, and where the future was bright. Driving away from the clubhouse, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more resistance to face, but he was ready. With allies like Claire and the support of the community, he was confident that Oakwood would continue to evolve and thrive. The future was bright, not just for Oakwood, but for everyone who believed in the power of progress and inclusivity. Thomas knew that he was building something lasting, a legacy that would stand the test of time.